Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, comrades and friends, my name is Dr. Ian Phillips, and Donald Trump has just made one of the most serious allegations that is so enormous that if it is true, it would represent one of the largest compromises of American political data in the history of the United States. During a primetime address from the White House, Trump claimed that the Chinese government had obtained 220 million American voter files. 220 million. Not 220,000, not 2 million, 222 million voter records. According to the White House, those files included names, home addresses, telephone numbers, political party preferences, and other information associated with voter registration. The administration says that the operation began around the 2020 election cycle and continued over several years. And it further claims that China established a specialized data exploitation unit to analyze the information. And Trump says American intelligence officials knew about at least portions of this activity, concealed its full significance, downplayed China's involvement, and withheld critical information from both him and the American public. If all of this is true, this is genuinely insane. This would mean that a hostile foreign government obtained political and personal information concerning a population roughly equivalent to 2/3 of the entire United States of America. Now, it would mean that China, right, is in possession of information capable of mapping American voters, right, not merely by geography, but potentially by political affiliation, voting history, age, telephone number, and susceptibility to particular messages. And it would mean that the American intelligence agencies either fail to recognize the magnitude of the compromise or recognize it and fail to alert the country. Neither possibility here is comforting. But we're going to first take a look here at this coming from the mouth of Donald Trump himself. I'm going to play the clip for you guys at 1.5x speed. And then we're going to start talking about this a little bit more because I think that this is just a ploy for Donald Trump to try to maybe coup himself into a third term in office. Because he's going to say, look, China is they obviously got voter data and they probably use this to sway an election, and therefore I was owed my second term, bro. So if he ends up running on the ballot, and again, the 22nd Amendment, I don't know if is necessarily that clear if he's allowed to run. I know he's not allowed to take office, but is he allowed to technically run for office? I think that there's some general dispute there because nobody's crazy enough to have done that. And so the answer then begs, it's okay, let's say he ended up winning, which his popularity is fucking zero right now. So let's say he ended up winning though. He might say, oh, well, I was owed a third term. And as a consequence of this election being stolen from me, I now need this term for myself. So that way it's only fair, bro. But anyways, we're going to watch the video here, and then we're going to give our 2 cents here. So let's play the clip.
5 major areas of concern. First, they show that over a period of years, starting during the 2020 election cycle, the People's Republic of China carried out what is believed to be the largest compromise of election data in history, resulting in China's illicit acquisition of 220 million U.S. voter files. That information includes names, addresses, phone numbers, political party preferences, and other sensitive data that would be needed to register to vote and engage in other nefarious activities, which is exactly what was happening. This data loss presents an unprecedented election security nightmare. The intelligence even shows that China assigned a data exploitation unit specifically to this new project. Compounding the travesty, the second set of documents we are releasing reveals that members of the deep state, very, very famous group of people, in many cases, in our intelligence agency work to actively suppress and downplay information about the extent of China's sinister election meddling, covering it up from both the president and the American people like no.
Oh my God. So this guy is basically trying to pull like a Designated Survivor, if anybody's ever seen that show before. He's trying to say members of the deep state kept this hidden from me, right? Because again, this would have taken place during Trump's first term in office. So in theory, like he should have known about that, right? So, but he's claimed that the deep state hid it from him, bro. And like the election was actually stolen, which he's affirmed countless times. For years now, he won his second term and he's still declaring that the election is stolen. And now he's going as far as doing this, which, in my opinion, is all a political ploy. I don't actually believe this is real. But if this is real, again, it's not saying that, China maybe stole an election. It's just saying that, they might have had those files here. So again, two things can be true at the exact same time. So, okay, so let's talk about this here. So before we sprint to China obtaining voter data to China stole this 2020 election, which is what I guarantee you is going to happen with Donald Trump. I guarantee you he's going to try to use this for their term. We need to perform an act that's almost revolutionary here in American politics. We need to take a step back, and we need to distinguish one claim from another. Again, we have to take a step back here. Trump presented several ideas together here. China obtained the voter files. China analyzed those files. China wanted to influence American politics. China may have explored illegal ballot operations. American officials concealed intelligence, and the 2020 election was somehow compromised. Those propositions are not interchangeable, ladies and gentlemen. The first may be true while the last remains false. A foreign government can obtain voter information without altering a single voter registration, and it can analyze the electorate without changing a ballot. It can target propaganda without entering a voting machine, and it can attempt to influence public opinion without changing the certified result. And it can represent a grave national security threat without proving that Donald Trump's longstanding claim that Joe Biden's victory was fraudulent. This distinction is not an attempt to protect China. China does not require my protection. The Chinese Communist Party operates one of the most sophisticated surveillance states on earth, and I hate China, right? China is horrible. I've been so against things like flock cameras in the United States recently. That's always been the conversation. But before that, I've been preaching against, things like, the Patriot Act for years. I'm like Edward Snowden's biggest fan. I mean, I always said if I were president of the United States, the first thing I would do is I would burn the Patriot Act on the White House lawn because it's a violation. It's a disgusting violation of the First Amendment. It's a disgusting violation of the Fourth Amendment because when the government is arresting people like journalists, when the government is spying on you and storing your data illegally without warrants, this is a problem, and this is not American first. This is not what the founders wanted when we had our Constitution. That's it, right? So the Chinese Communist Party here, horrible thing here. Right? Again, I'm not trying to protect China here, right? They engage in espionage, right? Cyber operations, political influence, right? And vast campaigns to collect information about people inside and outside of China, right? I don't like China. And if Beijing acquired, detailed information concerning nearly every American voter, that should be investigated with absolute seriousness. And now that we have these allegations, this should be investigated with actual seriousness. But seriousness requires some precision, ladies and gentlemen. Otherwise, national security becomes merely another stage upon which Trump performs his favorite play. The election he lost in 2020 was stolen. Everybody knew it. Everyone concealed it. And every newly released document must be interpreted as another page of the confession. Evidence so far does not establish this conclusion, though, guys. I mean, when we look at every single court case practically that was out there, showed that there was no evidence of the election being stolen. Right, because this was tried in court countless times, and not multiple times, and then like every fucking appeal, and he loses every single time. So the American Intelligence Agency, and in their community, American Intelligence Community, not agency, I guess, right? Their official 2021 assessment stated that it found no indication that China or any other foreign actor altered voter registrations, ballot casting, vote tabulation, and reported results in the 2020 election. The assessment was produced under officials appointed during Trump's own first administration. Under his own officials, they came to this conclusion, guys. His own officials. It was briefed to Trump before he left office. It distinguished between election influence and election interference. Again, influence would mean that attempting to shape what voters think, propaganda, right, social media manipulation, economic pressure, covert messaging, promoting narratives to help one candidate or damage another, right? All the things that the United States has done in other democratic countries as well, right? Whereas interference means attacking the actual mechanics of the election, changing registrations, preventing voting, altering ballots, manipulating tabulation, changing the result. The intelligence community concluded that foreign influence occurred. Russia attempted to damage Biden, and they attempted to help Trump. Right? Let that sink in for a second here. Iran attempted to damage Trump, though. Other governments engaged in smaller efforts, right? But investigators found no evidence that a foreign government successfully changed the technical result. Think about that, guys. Think about that here for just a second. Take a pause, right? Think about what that means here, right? And also, too, think about the history of the United States in the back of your mind. So I'm not just going to go one way on this one here. There needs to be a serious investigation on this when the President of the United States is making these allegations, because that would be absolutely insane. That's why, I always have, a soft spot in my heart for the January 6th protesters, right? Or rioters, right? I have some sympathy because I'm like, look, if the President of the United States is telling you that an election is stolen, right, and that it was all fraudulent, then you have not just a right but a duty to overthrow that government. Right, I understand, dude. You need to get these people out of power who stole a democratic election. I understand it. Or I understand their sentiment, but in the same breath, we have to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, at some point, like we can't just encourage this behavior when there's no evidence, right? So it's a catch-22 here, right? That's why Trump pardoned them all, right? But at the end of the day here, Trump was the subject of this China was the subject of this internal disagreement here. So there was some disagreement as to whether, China had as much influence as some people say. So the majority concluded, though, that Beijing influenced activities, but ultimately, so they considered to influence activities, but they ultimately decided not to deploy a campaign that was intended to change the election's outcome, right? So even if they had this little agency or this little task force, right? They did not deploy a campaign to do so. Now, one intelligence official disagreed and believed that China took some steps to undermine Trump's reelection. And that disagreement is what matters here, and that's what's at stake here today. It should not be erased. The intelligence analysis is not divine revelation, right? Analysts work with incomplete information all the time, right? Different officials may assign different meanings to the same intercepted communication, right? Maybe different meanings to even just like little things going on in government, like little secrets that they have, like things that are floating around, just through the grapevine. But neither side of that dispute concluded publicly that China changed the 2020 votes. And that is where Trump's presentation has become dangerous, right? I mean, he takes evidence of vulnerability and he presents it beside allegations of fraud until the viewer naturally fuses them two together. China possessed the data. Voting systems possess vulnerabilities. Officials disagreed internally, and therefore the election result is questionable. No, that's not how it works. The conclusion does not automatically follow. A burglar may possess the architectural plans to a bank, right? That is deeply concerning. It does not prove that he entered the vault. It certainly does not prove which money he stole. The 220 million figure itself also requires investigation. The House repeatedly refers to voter files. What does that mean? Like, what the hell does that mean? Right? Does that mean that, and why are we not getting more evidence with respects to this? Are you not going to speak up, Trump? You're not going to tell us about this? You don't think the American people have the right to know? Right? Well, of course you don't. That's because you're privatizing your communications on your own damn Truth Social website, right? God. But okay, what does this include here? Does it include inactive registrations, people who moved, duplicate records, historical files, people registered in more than one state at different points in their lives, right? What does this include? Commercial voter profiles that combine public registration information with consumer data? Is that what we're talking about? What are we talking about here exactly? The administration has not provided a transparent public explanation sufficient to answer those questions. And that matters because 220 million files sounds identical to China hacked the personal account of 220 million individual voters. Those may not be the same thing. American voter data exist inside a strange and increasingly indefensible system. In many states, substantial portions of voter registration files are legally available. Political campaigns obtain them, parties obtain them, researchers obtain them, commercial vendors purchase them. The information may include a person's name, address, registration status, voting history, and party affiliation. Voter history does not reveal whom the person voted for. Right? The secret ballot remains secret. Right? But it may reveal whether someone participated in a particular election. Commercial data companies then merge those government records with consumer information. Magazine subscriptions, property data, purchasing patterns, estimated income, religious interests, right? Gun ownership, you name it here, whether a person's angry, whether the person is frightened. I mean, you can think back to those situations whereby they can even predict whether or not somebody's pregnant beforehand. I remember there was a parent one time, I think I mentioned this in another video, who was upset that they were sending their kid literature on baby diapers and stuff. And all of a sudden they realized, oh, wait a minute, the magazine actually predicted based on buying patterns whether or not whether the girl was pregnant before the family even knew. Right. So it's crazy stuff what they can predict here. But by the time the profile is complete, a political organization or Foreign Intelligence Agency service, they may understand the voter better than some of the members of their own family, right? Which is just crazy, right? It's crazy. So it's entirely possible, again, that China acquired an enormous amount of American voter information without hacking 220 million protected American accounts. It may have purchased some information. It may have, got some through commercial brokers, stolen some vulnerable systems, hacked some other databases here, merge old records with new records, right? But the White House itself uses the peculiar formulation that information was bought, stolen, or hacked. And those are three dramatically different methods here. Buying data may be perfectly lawful. Stealing is criminal. Hacking an election database is a cyber attack against critical infrastructure. Lumping them together produces a terrifying headline while avoiding the rather important question of what precisely happened. And this is why the complete records should be released, at least with respects to, what's going on with this. Which states were affected, what systems were penetrated, what fields did China receive, so on and so forth. Dates of birth, right? You name it here. Either way, at the end of the day, guys, I think that we're going to see a situation here where the Trump administration is now going to use this as a ploy to launch himself into the third term. Or he's going to say, all right, look, this was stolen, and so therefore there has to be some evidence because put two and two together, right? They stole, 220 million American voter files, right? And then what, right? Everybody else downplayed it, and I found out about this because this is some big conspiracy, because maybe I'm the crazy guy, right? I'm like the rabid dog here on trying to switch them. I'm trying to drain the swamp, bro. Of course they try to screw me over because I'm trying to be the one who's trying to help you Americans, right? It's just pure propaganda here. But he might use this now to escalate himself to a third term. I could definitely see that happening. I have no doubt in my mind that that's probably what's going to happen. He's going to try to violate the 22nd as much as he can, and he's going to challenge us in court. And, if the United States government can do a democratic election during World War II, then there's no excuse for Trump to stay in power here, even if there's court cases going on with respects to this. All right, it's unfathomable to me that we allow this to happen, and people need to be speaking up against this. This is not America first. This is not democracy. This is horrible what's going on in our country, and nobody seems to take it serious nowadays. I don't know what to say anymore. I don't know what to say. I mean, as an American, you need to be speaking up against this right now, because before you know it, in 2 years' time, and I was always one of those people who said, he won't run for a third term. He won't do it. But first term Trump versus second term Trump, those are two totally different Trumps. Compared to his first term, Trump looks like the Antichrist. He looks like an angel in his first term compared to what he is now. All right, bombing 7 countries simultaneously, right? Hosting 3 different proxy wars right now as we speak, right? Privatizing presidential communications, whereby he's charging Wall Street and financial institutions money now so they can get access to insider information before the average person can. This is crazy. A business-to-business API is the sitting president of the United States? Are you fucking kidding me? Hiding the Epstein files. This is a horrible human being, and now he's trying to coup the United States government. I'm going to go as far as saying that here, and we need to be speaking up, because this is how it starts, right? This is how it starts, right? Again, in the 1930s, everybody likes to compare him to like Hitler, right? Mussolini, Stalin, right? I always refrained against it. I said, all right, he's not at that level, guys. And I understand, want to say, I bet you he wishes he was an authoritarian like that, very fascistic, right? But in the same breath, I don't think he's at that level. I do think he's at that level now, and I'm an historian, and so I can say that. I do think he's at that level, right? We're talking like early 1930s Trump. He's setting it up right now. He's setting up the coup. He's gonna maybe take control. At least he's gonna try to, I think. And if he doesn't, it's a fucking miracle, right? But who knows? Who knows what's going to go on here? I'm telling you what, it ain't good either way. So I guess the question now begs, did this actually happen? What's the investigation going to look like? I didn't see any evidence before them. I think this is just a ploy to try to get him into a third term. It's one of the scariest things I've seen a president do. It almost reminds me of when Saddam Hussein was calling off names of all the people who went against him. And he dragging them out of the room, right, where they would be executed. It almost gives me that chilling vibe, because this is how democracies die. They die in darkness when nobody's talking about this, and so we need to speak up. But anyways, guys, hopefully you did enjoy the video here today. I'm curious to see what your guys' thoughts on this whole matter are. Obviously, mine are pretty negative here, but you can follow me on social media at Ian Phillips USA to keep updated with some more content here. My name's Dr. Ian Phillips, and try to get us to 1,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. Peace.